All right, friends, we're going to continue to work on our writing this morning. So let's get started. You will continue to need your writing notebook and your pencil. Our goal today is to think about how Cynthia Rylant observes her environment to nourish her ideas for writing. And you will also be able to envision the events connected to your topic in order to add sensory details to your writing. And you might be thinking, Mrs. Bauer, what are you talking about? But let me show you. So in Cynthia's book, Best Wishes, she has said that she roamed around while growing up, observing her world, conversations, people, and settings. And today we're going to think deeply about personal conversations, experiences, and places as you continue to collect or gather important details connected to your narratives. So listen as I read this part of her autobiography, Best Wishes. She says, I roamed around a lot when I was growing up, along the country dirt roads at first, where friends like Miss Maggie Ziegler lived in her old log house. Then later I roamed a little town named Beaver with its market, its filling station, its hardware store. No one expected my roaming to turn me into a writer either, but it helped. I saw what was happening inside houses. I heard what people were saying outside stores. I met a lot of animals, and all these things I remembered when I became a writer, and I put them into books. Wow, that's really beautiful. She grew up in a part of West Virginia called Appalachia. She used her observations to write her detailed books. She listened, felt, saw the details in her environment or surroundings. Let's take a look inside one of her texts that she's written, called Appalachia, The Voices of Sleeping Birds. On page 1, she writes, in a certain part of the country called Appalachia, you will find dogs named Prince or King living in little towns with names like Coal City and Sally's Backbone. These dogs run free, being country dogs, and their legs are full of muscles from running rabbits up mountains or from following boys who push old bikes against the hill roads they call hollows. These are mostly good dogs and can be trusted. The owners of these dogs who live in Appalachia have names like Mamie and Boyd. Now I've skipped a few pages and I want you to listen just to this paragraph here and notice again her description. She says, morning in these houses in Appalachia is quiet and full of light, and the mountains out the window look new, like God made them just that day. Night in these houses is thick. The mountains wear heavy shawls of fog, and giant moths flap at the porch lights while cars cut through the dark hollows like burrowing moles. If it is a Sunday, nearly everyone will go to church. Most of these Appalachians are Baptists, but many are Methodists or Presbyterians. And she continues to go on. I noticed that Cynthia uses her observation and observe the people in her town and the things going on in her town to make such descriptive writing. Now I want to talk to you about how you can use your 5 senses in your writing. Many beginning writers, like you and I, rely only on the sense of sight to describe a scene. But if you're only writing with sight, you're ignoring 4 of your 5 senses. So here are some quick writing tips to write with your other senses as well. So to write with sight, one good technique is to keep in mind describing things indirectly. To convey the brightness of the sun, you could say directly that the sun is bright. But you could also describe the way the light from the sun causes the glass windows to shine solid white. What do you think is more descriptive? Just saying the sun is bright or using that second part of the sentence? The way the light from the sun causes the glass windows to shine solid white. Wow, what a difference in that writing. You could also write with taste. One common technique that writers often use is the deliberate mixing of sensory words for effect. So for example, you might describe the zesty taste of a lemon as bright and give it a visual description, or the last light dissolving over the horizon as a whimper, which is an auditory description. So you can actually use your different senses to mix it up a bit. Write with smell tip. As with perfume and cologne, a little bit goes a long way. So you don't generally want to overwhelm the reader with smelly descriptions, but a few well-placed details can create a powerful impression. When you write with sound, use automatopoeia to help capture the sound of the scene. The plop of a frog dropping into a pond, the clink of 2 champagne glasses, the crackle of a dry log on a hot fire, the whoosh of a car racing by. Be careful that you don't make it sound too cartoony or comic book-like, but use onomatopoeia to let your readers hear the sounds that you hear. And you can also write with touch. The sense of touch is about more than the way things feel in your hands. Although texture is an important part, touch also captures sensations that typically occur internally, like the experience of your temperature or pain or something that's pleasurable. So for example, your temperature, you might be feeling red-faced and hot and clammy. So that might have to do with your temperature. You might be in agony because something was so painful. So these are just a few ways that we can write with our 5 senses. Now let me show you what I'm going to do next. So tonight, as I'm thinking about my topic, my dog's Sophie, and I tried to think of Cynthia's strategies of envisioning. I thought back when my husband Sam and I chose Sophie. We were at the SPCA in Delaware County, and I closed my eyes and everything from that day rushed back. So you really need to get the entire picture in your own head first before you just start writing. So these are some things that I wanted to add. The first thing I remember was going into the SPCA, and we had looked a long time for a dog and just didn't find the one that we knew we loved. And however, I remember walking in there and the barking, the loudness of the barking. I'm trying to think of another way to write that, but at least I'm going to jot it down for now. So the loudness of the barking was almost piercing to our ears. And I can figure out how to actually put this in a sentence, but I need to get these ideas down so I don't forget to add them and these descriptive details to my writing. So I just remember walking in there and every single dog was barking and yapping. But then there was this peaceful silence of Sophie, who was curled up in a ball. And she just laid there so peacefully and was not barking at all, not even coming back at the other dogs or anything. And she just looked so sweet, and we both looked at her like, oh, she's ours. But then something we saw was a bright sign on her cage that said, adoption pending. And that made me feel like I was devastated. I was hopeless. Oops, so sorry. I didn't spell devastated correctly. So remember that touch doesn't necessarily have to be something that you feel with your hands, but it can be how you're feeling inside as well. So when I just remember seeing that sign about the adoption pending, and I thought to myself, like, oh, I thought she was the one. And then we get up to her cage and somebody else already was going to get her, which made me really sad. The smell in there was, dogs, just reeked of dog and dog food. And there was nothing really to taste. So I'm going to leave that one out. But as I continue to think about that day and the days leading up to the time that we actually adopted her, I'm going to go ahead and continue to add different points into each of these things so that when I go back into my writing and think about how I'm going to put this story together, I'm going to add these details in there. So I want you to go ahead and do the same thing today.